Welcome to the Modern Family Finance Podcast, where we talk about all things money, career, and life. I'm Jenni, your host and a San Francisco Bay Area financial planner serving women and LGBT professionals. So today we are diving into a topic that is on everyone's mind, especially my mind, which is taking control of your time, managing your to-do list, and creating a life that feels both productive and fulfilling. And today we're talking to Alexis Haselberger, who is a time management and productivity coach who specializes in helping people do exactly that. Alexis has made it her mission to empower people to do more and stress less. I need that. Through her coaching, workshops, and online courses, she's helped thousands of people take back control of their time and their lives. So I'm really thrilled to have you on the show. Thanks for being here today, Alexis.
Well, I'm excited to be here too, Jenni.
Cool. Well, I'll just start with telling me, how did you get into this work and what was your
Yes.
background?
So, my background, let's just say it wasn't a straight line. Of course, in college, I just took classes I wanted and majored in something that was exciting to me. So I majored in existentialism, education theory, and studio art, which, as we
Mhm.
all know, is the clearest career path to success, right? And I had no
Maybe
idea.
internal success.
Yeah, internal success,
Yeah.
sure, but it was not very clear, what I would do after that. And I fell into startups.
Yeah.
And for 15 years or so, I worked in early stage startups doing essentially everything that wasn't sales and engineering. So
Mm.
operations, finance, HR, interfacing with legal, like all of the stuff that runs a business that isn't the sales and engineering part. And over that time, I was in really like fast paced environments where there was always way more work to do than people to do the work. There were always people at the office at 10 p.m. Like sometimes people would sleep in the office. And I knew I didn't want that. Like I wanted to be successful in work and in my career. And I also knew that my life, like the rest of my life outside of that, was equally, if not more important to me than that. And so I started kind of figuring out, how do I set boundaries early? How do I create processes for myself so that I am able to do the work that I need to get done and do it at a really high level and get promoted, et cetera, but also end at the end of the day and go home and enjoy my life and not work on weekends, et cetera. And so I was doing that. And eventually, long story short, eventually one of the CEOs that I worked for said, "Hey, do you think you could do a productivity workshop for our company, just based on the stuff you already do?" And I thought, yeah, that sounds like so much fun. I would love to do that. And so I did that, and I think that just sparked something in me where I was like, oh, this stuff that I'm doing, it could have a greater reach than just me and my own life. And so many people had started coming to me for that stuff that I realized, oh, there is maybe a market here for some skills that I have acquired that didn't necessarily come innately to me, but I've acquired over time that I could share with other people. And so that's how my coaching and consulting business was born. And then, of course, after that, a few years after that, I got diagnosed with ADHD, and I was like, oh, now it all makes sense why I was like so interested in this and why I had to really work at those skills, because they just didn't come naturally to me.
Wow. Okay. I didn't know that. So that's an awesome origin story of how you got into this. And what kind of folks do you work with now?
So I tend to work with people who are kind of mid to late career, folks who are, well established in their career, let's just say. I find that most people fall into this camp of what I call successful but got there by brute force,
Mhm.
right? So it's like they've achieved success in their career. Maybe other people looking in at them think they have it all together, but they don't feel like that at all. Like they feel like, well, I have it all together because I work every night until 11 p.m. before like shutting my laptop before my eyes, close by themselves. Or, sure, I've gotten here, but I haven't been to my kids' Little League game in the last 5 years, or my health is suffering, or I don't get any sleep, or I just feel really stressed and overwhelmed all the time. And they're looking for some help to kind of stay successful, but do so with a whole lot less stress. So,
Mhm.
if we want to kind of label these people, it tends to be like managers, executives,
Mhm.
founders,
Mhm.
entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
doctors, lawyers, people kind of in the professions,
Yeah.
typically that have families, but not always. Just people who have a lot on their plate,
Yeah.
and a lot at risk, right? That they are working towards.
Yeah. So these high performance professionals, I love what you said about folks who got there by brute force, folks who kind of gutted their way through it, right? When they come to you, like, what are some of the what are the common struggles that you see?
So many, but I think there's one kind of really big mindset struggle. And mindset is such a, I don't know, loaded term. It's a little woo-woo, but like this, it really is that they think that somehow there's some way that they just haven't cracked the code, but they're going to be able to do everything,
I understand
everything
that.
they want.
Yes. Yes.
That is a mental hurdle that we actually have to get over before we can learn to prioritize in such a way that makes sense. Because the reality is, like you, me, and everyone else, we could work 18 hours a day for the rest of our lives and there would still be more work tomorrow, right?
Hmm.
Like, we're not going to do everything. I mean, my to read book list, I'm never
Hmm.
going to read all those books. It has like 500 things on it and it grows, by 3 every day, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big hurdle. And then there are also just structural hurdles. Like, so many of my clients, I mean, I was just meeting with a couple of VPs this morning that are doing some kind of group coaching with each other together. And they were both saying that they had, last week, they each had 38 hours of meetings, right? And so if you're trying to somehow handle your email
Hmm.
and your Slack or Teams and get your actual work done, and you have almost 40 hours of meetings a week, like, that math doesn't math, right?
Right.
Like, you're going to be working in the evening. And so really meetings are a huge issue. I think that just the volume of stuff that
Yeah.
comes at people is a big issue.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times it's like people are they lack systems. I think this is a
Mhm.
really big part of it, where it's kind of like, maybe in college it was like fairly easy for you to keep track of your stuff, and the early stages of your career it was like pretty easy for you to keep track of it. Maybe you had a notepad and you kept your to-do list there and you kept the rest of this stuff in your brain. And then at a certain point, your responsibilities, your scope explodes, and your old quote systems don't really work anymore, and you're not sure what to do.
Okay, there's so much to dig into here. Let's go back to the first thing you mentioned, which is like this belief, because I have this belief too. Like, there's just some way to get everything I want to get done. Everybody else seems to be doing it. So clearly there's some path. Conceptually, I agree with you, like there is no way, but why does it look like everybody else seems to be able to do it? And how do you help people with this mindset challenge?
Yeah. So first thing is, like, it seems that way because we like view people through their own social media or whatever, where they only tell us the good stuff, right? But
Yeah.
I guarantee you, nobody out there is like has it all together and is always able to accomplish all the things that they want to accomplish. I will
Hmm.
also say, like, this tends to be a problem that people who are ambitious have, right?
Hmm.
So it's like, I don't work with a lot of people who don't have big ambitions and
Hmm.
don't have a lot of things they want to do,
Hmm.
right? Maybe if you're living just like a simple life and you
Hmm.
you don't have a lot of ambitions, maybe you are able to get through a lot of that
Hmm.
stuff. But I think we're looking at like the curated view of people's lives, of what they're willing to show us. We're not looking at the real view. So, and you know, what we're seeing is not real, right?
Yeah.
And then how do we help people with this? So I think that the first part is really just like talking through what are all the things that you wanted, what's going on, and what does your life actually look like. I often have my clients do a little time tracking when we start working together for just a week to see,
Hmm.
like, where's your time really going, right?
Yeah.
How long do things really take? What are you spending your time on that you don't want to be? What are you spending your time on that you do want to be? Like, where can we get a baseline? And I think that's pretty eye-opening for people. Like, people, it's like we all live in this world where we think we can get things done faster than we can,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
yes, me too, right? It's like I have to learn these lessons every single
Mhm.
day,
Yeah.
right? And so I think part of it is we just start with the data and we say,
Hmm.
like, look what's actually happening right now, and where do we want to make some tweaks and changes. And sometimes we use some tools like time blocking. We'll say, like, let's just try to fit, okay, you say you want to do these 30 things today
Hmm.
and you think you
Hmm.
can do them. Let's actually take it a little more granularly. How long do you think this one's going to take, right? How long? I mean, even though we're of course underestimating surely when we're doing that,
Hmm.
you find pretty quickly that, oh, of these 30 things you think you're going to be able to do, you probably only have time to do 5 of them.
Hmm.
And once we get past the kind of reality of the situation, then we can learn to prioritize in such a way that, you can feel good about the trade-offs that you're making, because there will always be trade-offs.
So that's the hardest part, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to use myself as an example. I am a prime example of somebody who like thinks I can get 30 things done, but really I can only have 5. I'm going to have these 3 meetings and then I'm going to go to the gym and then I'm going to get ready for this podcast and I'm going to, I mean, like it's like I didn't have I barely just made it here, right? Because I
Yeah.
was trying to scrunch it all in. But the hard thing is what you said earlier, which is ambitious people want to do a lot of things. So
Yeah.
to give up, like to make these trade-offs feels really difficult. Like, well, I do want to spend an extra 20 minutes to do some more lifting, or whatever it is. I do want to spend an extra 30 minutes to prepare for this meeting. So, how do you like help people figure out how to make these trade-offs?
Well, we use a lot of experimentation, right?
Okay.
Because I think that sometimes we have to like try something out to see what feels better and what doesn't. And I talk a lot about this concept that I developed called task realism, right? Which is really like, let's say you have time, let's just simplify it and say, tomorrow you have time to do 5 things. Is it going to feel better to you to have decided the 5 things that you're going to do of all the things that you could do, have decided like these are really the most important 5 things for me to do and do those things? Or is it going to feel better for you to have 25 things on your list and do 5 of them? Even if you do the same 5 things, even if you chose the same 5 best things to do, in the first case, you feel really good about yourself. And in the second case, you feel terrible about yourself. But we got the same things done, right? Or the same
Right.
amount of things done. And so I think just talking through a lot of examples of this and getting people to experiment with task realism, like what does it feel like at the end of your day when you have pared it down, but you actually did the things you said you were going to do? Versus the alternative, which is where most of us are living in, where we're just pushing things from day to the next and feeling bad every day when we push, the same 30 odd things. So I think it kind of starts there. And then it's not as if we're not ever going to be able to do those things, right? It's
Mm,
just like we can't do them all right now. And
yeah.
so an analogy that I like to use is around like reading books. Like, let's just say that you have time to read 25 pages of a book a day. And that's like a lot for a lot of people, right? But let's
Hmm.
just say that you have that amount of time. Is it going to feel better to you to read 5 different books at once and read 5 pages of each one a day? And then eventually in 6 months, you'll finish them all? Or is it going to feel better to read 25 pages of one book and finish that book in a couple of weeks and then start the next one?
Hmm.
Right? Like what will feel like you accomplished more, right? In the end, you read 25 pages, right? But what feels better? And that's kind of what we're shooting for is like, you don't have to, we're not saying you're never going to do this stuff. We're just
Mm,
saying like, let's do some of it now and some of it later.
yeah.
Like, we're moving beyond this planning horizon of like today and tomorrow, and we're
Right.
starting to like think a little more broadly.
Right. I like that. I mean, I think a lot of times, what do they say? It's hard to make a lot of progress you feel like you don't make any progress in a short amount of time, but over a long time, you can make some amazing progress.
Right. Yeah.
Um, that this kind of goes into something you wrote about in one of your blog articles, which is that you don't need to be caught up to feel accomplished.
Yeah.
And this article really resonated with me because that's where I personally get stuck a lot is like I feel like I can't walk away till I'm done. And
Mhm.
therefore I'll end up well, I think I only have a half an hour slot. I end up going over because I just cannot walk away. I don't know if you have seen this problem with your coaching clients, but like, I don't feel good unless it's done. So how do you deal with people with this problem?
Well, I think that part of it is like reckoning with that reality that like it's not actually ever done. When you're
Mm,
sitting there in your last half hour of the day and you're trying to finish all those emails and you're getting them out the door, I guarantee you that by the time you finish the ones that you started with half an hour ago, there's more in there. Right?
mm,
Like more stuff has come in. And so
yeah,
just like email and dishes and
yeah,
laundry and all of this
yeah,
stuff, it's never going to be done, right? Like there's always more. And so,
yeah.
a lot of times people are saying like, well, I will get to the fun stuff of my life when I am done with
Hmm.
the kind of obligation, right? And I think that's a hard way to look at it because you're never going to get to the fun stuff, or you're never going to get to the fun stuff without guilt in some way.
Mm,
Whereas if you can say, I know it's not done. I know there will be more work tomorrow. And I'm going to take some time to prioritize some things that are important to me outside of this.
mm.
Then, and if you do that over and over again, you start to kind of train yourself that it's actually okay.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, and you mentioned one thing, guilt, right? Like I think this guilt of saying no to other people, or maybe, having to let people know that you're not going to get it done, that trips up a lot of people. Maybe guilt for yourself that you haven't done enough, right? Is this just like, look, this guilt is going to happen and and just let it pass? Or how do you help people navigate that guilt, which is very real, especially for women?
Yeah. Yes, especially for women. Yeah. I mean, so I think part of it is learning to set expectations
Hmm.
that may feel, because like I agree, like I never miss a deadline, right? Like I can't, like I can't do
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
It's just like accountability is my top is my top
Yeah.
value, and like I can't even think of a time when I missed a deadline, right? But it's not because I'm working until midnight to make it
Mm,
happen. It's because I have set expectations so that I'm not overcommitting and
mhm,
giving myself too much, right? And so I think like the guilt often comes when we have not set expectations appropriately, or we've done like best case scenario, right? Like
yeah.
we've said, oh yeah, I can get this to you on Tuesday or whatever. And in reality, we should probably be saying like, oh, I think I can get it done on Tuesday. I can get that to you by the end of the week. Like, does that
Yeah.
timing work for you?
Right.
Because then you're giving yourself extra buffer, extra leeway for when things come up or take longer than you expect, which is always the case, right? Like
Hmm.
things always take longer than we think, unexpected things always come up. And then I think that some of the guilt of, there's often a lot of guilt of like, okay, when I'm not with my kids, I feel guilty that I'm not working and answering those emails,
Hmm.
and then vice versa, right? Like when
Hmm.
I'm working too late, then I feel like I'm not spending time on myself or my family or what it is. And so I think that part of it also is deciding like what boundaries feel good and appropriate to you
Hmm.
and testing them out, right?
Mm.
I believe a lot in experimentation and
Hmm.
iteration,
Hmm.
because I'm not going to convince you by words that
Hmm.
something will feel better, right? But if you test it out, you may find that it does.
Hmm. Can you give me some examples of boundaries or things that you or your clients have tried that have helped them with some of these mindset challenges, whether around guilt or just trying to do the 30 things and feeling like they can't get it done?
Yeah, so there's a couple that I think are
Mm.
really easy
Yeah.
interventions, simple to do, that work really well, and especially around just like email and like that stuff comes
Yeah.
up a lot, right? And Teams messages and Slack. And
Yeah.
so one of them is to put an out of office reply when you're not planning to be in your inbox. So, for instance, I have an out of office reply. I work a 4-day work week these days, and I have an out of office reply that goes out on Thursday at 5 p.m. or
Mm.
whenever I'm done working for the day. And it says, hey, thanks so much for reaching out. I am working a 4-day work week these days. And so I'll be back in my inbox on Monday. And then it has like, if you're looking for this, do this,
Right.
whatever. There's like a few things in there where they could self serve, or,
Right.
hey, if it's a true emergency, reach out to my assistant and
Right.
she can get to me. Right. And this does two things. One, it lets people know what to expect
Yeah.
from me, right? And I don't feel guilty about that because they know what to expect. I'm setting that expectation. But it also keeps me in integrity, right?
Mm.
I'm not going to check my email on the weekend if I've
Mhm.
told people I'm not going to, because that would be not an integrity for me, right? So it's
Mhm.
kind of this like self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways. Something that people can do during the workday, like if you are just like, I just want to turn those Slack notifications off
Mhm.
for just a couple of hours so that I can get this project done that I really need to be working on. Change your status to
Mm.
heads down on a project until 4 p.m.
Mhm.
When I emerge, I'll respond.
Mhm.
And you would be surprised how much guilt that takes away. Because I think
Mm.
lots of times, especially in like, I mean, so many of us are in remote and hybrid situations,
Mhm.
we want people to think and to know that we're doing a good job and we're doing our
Mhm.
work, and that we're available, and simply the act of telling people what we're doing can relieve us of that guilt.
Mm. I like that. Yeah, I mean, it's not like a lot of these strategies, and I feel like a lot of the challenge for ambitious people is not that they're lazing around, it's
Yeah,
that they feel overwhelmed and
yeah,
unable to manage the things that they want to do. So yeah, I mean, any other like kind of these shifts or just tips that are helpful? I love both of them. The ideas that you have, just putting it out of office, even if it's just for like the one day that you're off, right? Because a lot of
Yeah.
times you'll do it for like 2 week vacation, but not for that one day, and then you'll
Yeah,
feel
or
bad
like
about
a
it.
slow to respond, right? Like
Right.
I often will do like, oh, you know what? I'm like in meetings or all of most of this week. I'll just throw up a slow to respond out of
Yeah.
office, right? Just like give myself a little leeway, a little breathing room so that I don't have to like rush into my inbox in between every single meeting and just like make sure that I'm not missing something important. Right. I think another big thing that takes away or reduces that overwhelm is to use some sort of task management system, right?
Mm-hmm.
To stop keeping stuff in your head. I think there is a huge amount of anxiety and overwhelm for people when they don't have a true trusted system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something where they're putting all their stuff where they can prioritize it, where they can move things out into the future. Because the reality is a lot of people are just working from a list, right? Like
Yeah.
here's my list of 500 things that I need to do. And then every day I look at my list, I feel very
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmed. I stare at
Mm-hmm.
my computer for a little while and I just like randomly pick
Are
something
you
and I
videotaping me? This is my life?
and then I work on it, right?
Yeah.
And no, I'm not videotaping you, but I just have had a lot of
Yeah.
experience with ambitious people, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that a huge part of this is getting it all out there. Like the list is the first step, but
Yeah.
then we actually need to figure out when we're going to do this stuff, like when we're going to prioritize this stuff in time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think getting it out of our head is really the first step
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise we just have this ball of anxiety in the back of our brains that's like, I know I'm missing something. I just don't know what it is, when it's going to come back to bite me or how bad it's going to be. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're waking up at 4 a.m. being like, oh no, I didn't send that email or whatever. Right. Where, our sleep deteriorates and it's kind of downward spiral. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the first things that I work on with everybody is like, let's get stuff out of your brain. Let's get it into a system, like a trusted system, and
Yeah.
let's prioritize by date.
Mm. Yes. I love that. Yeah. A true trusted system. It's GDD all the way, right?
Yes.
Getting things
Yes.
done. Going back to kind of the boundaries and the trade-offs too, right? Like, you know, I guess one of my hypotheses is that for a lot of us ambitious or kind of growth oriented people, right, who really want to get better and be better, it's sometimes it's not even an issue of time management. It's an issue of, maybe lots of times it's not actually an issue of time management. It's an issue of like internal worthiness, overachieving, you know what I mean, like insecurity management of
Mhm.
like, if I'm not there on Slack all the time, I'm not going to look good. If I don't go, if I don't over prepare for this meeting, it's all going to fall apart. Like these
Yeah.
kind of are, there's an anxiety that causes people to kind of be overwhelmed and overwork and work 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, I'm sure you have experienced this in your coaching and your work.
Yeah.
So what are some of the conversations or things that you do with this situation?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I would say I work with a lot of perfectionists or
Yeah.
recovering perfectionists,
Yeah.
right? And I think that one of the concepts that we really dive into a lot is the concept of good enough.
Hmm.
And I feel very strong, like good enough is my favorite concept, right? And I don't think of it as settling at all. I think good enough gets a bad rap. And we
Hmm.
think of good enough as like, oh yeah, it's good enough, but like it's not great and whatever. And I actually think about it very differently. I think that everything we do has a point at which after good enough is going to be diminishing returns, right?
Hmm.
So it's like often, the amount of time it takes you to get something from 0 to 90%, right? It's going to take the same amount of time to get it from 90 to 100 or 99. We're never going to get to
Hmm.
100, right? But
Hmm.
99. And nobody's going to notice the difference but you, right? Like
Hmm.
you're the only one. And so sometimes it's like a matter of experimenting with that and just seeing like, what if I like just pull it back and see what happens? I often think of it as different situations call for different amounts of good enough, right? So it's like if you're a heart surgeon, good enough when you're in surgery has to be really, really, really good, right?
Right.
If you're writing an email to someone, like it really needs to make sure that it has no punctuation or spelling errors, right? It needs to be professional. It needs to be clear. Maybe use a couple of bullet points. But the
Yeah.
reality is, a lot of people will spend 45 minutes writing an email that, studies show people spend about 13 seconds reading an email, right?
Mm.
And so the mismatch is kind of there for the
Yeah.
effort that we're putting into something. I always think of it kind of like, like a pass fail test or a pass fail course. It's like, hey, if I'm taking a pass fail test and I get more than 71%,
Right.
I studied too hard. Like I should have spent that time somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So like, where's the pass fail for different things? And like, where in your life are you willing to lower the bar? Because we can't be at the high bar everywhere, right? Like you can't have a spotless house and be
Hmm.
the CEO and like show up to every single event and volunteer in your kids' class every single week and like that's not going to work. So where are the places in your life where it's really important for you to achieve at that super high level? And then
Hmm.
where are the parts of your life where it's actually okay to lower the bar or to outsource or
Hmm.
to do something a little bit differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point and reminds me of my other question, which is like around outsourcing and around money, right? So I'm a financial planner. One of the sessions I do with my clients is a life planning meeting where we kind of reflect on our mortality, what we really want out of life, and what are
Yeah.
some of the things that we would change. And very consistently, some of the answers I get is I wish I had more time to spend with my loved ones. I wish I had more time to travel and explore. I wish I had more time to take care of my health, except work is taking up all my time, right? So that's usually because I'm working with ambitious, 40, kind of what you mentioned, mid to late, between 30s to 50s, people who
Yep.
are in the thick of their career as well as their family and sandwich generation, all that. So where was I going with this? Oh, the question is like, one of the questions I ask people is like, are there ways in which money, which is kind of a stored, like if you think about time as a resource, like money is also just another resource, right? Like, how can we best use your money potentially to free up some of the time? What are
Yeah.
your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I am totally on board. I have similar conversations with
Yeah,
my clients where we talk about like, look, obviously we all have our own budgets. We all
yeah,
have our own, thing. But where is money spent on something going to give you back time that will allow you to lead a more fulfilled life without, destroying your financial
yeah.
goals, right? So it's like where does that happy medium live, right? And so, it's like for me, I have a house cleaner who comes every 2 weeks and like does a deep clean. And, I outsource the rest of the cleaning to my children, honestly. But, that's a place where I'm happy to spend money because otherwise cleaning my house would be like it is so worth it to me if I look at the dollars going
Yeah.
out to the hours coming in. Or, I even think about like getting groceries delivered in the same
Hmm.
way. I feel like pre-pandemic, I used to be like, no, 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 I'm going to go to Costco. I'm not going to pay the additional 10% Instagram or, Instacart fee or whatever. And then I started realizing, oh, how much time am I getting? Like if I spend an extra $20 getting my groceries delivered, but I didn't have to go to the stressful grocery store or like Costco on a weekend,
Yeah.
that's actually really valuable. It's like a $20 fee I'm willing to pay,
Right.
for that sort of thing. And so what I recommend that people do is think about not only where they can kind of outsource for money, but
Yeah.
also are there places where they can like barter with other
Hmm.
people or trade with other people? Like I think that, when my kids were little, we lived in a condo and there were like 3 units in the building. And there was another family that had similar aged kids to us. And we used to swap babysitting every other week.
Mm.
So every other week, it'd be a movie night at our house. We'd feed
Yeah.
all the kids dinner and the other parents would go out and then we'd swap. And we weren't spending any extra money, but
Right.
we were getting a lot of time. And
Yeah.
so I think thinking outside the box of like we have to do everything ourselves can be really valuable.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too. I also think that sometimes money can help you solve problems that, sure, if you spent enough time, you might be able to solve it. But if
Mhm.
you've been trying and you're still stuck, take time management as an example. Perhaps
Yeah.
engaging in a group coaching or something like that can
Mm.
actually help you break through the barrier, right? So whether
Right.
that's in time management or personal training, those kind of things, it's like, yes, yes, I'll do it. But if you can't do it on your own, perhaps paying for some help can actually really help you break through that in a faster way.
Totally. Yeah, I feel 100%. And I do this in my own life. It's like when I am struggling with something and I'm like, yeah, I'm smart. I could figure it out.
Yeah.
But do I want to, or
Right.
do I want to pay some money to get some help, to hire an expert,
Yes.
to, get some support
Yes.
there? Or, this, I was thinking about my favorite example of this when you were talking. It's like I always have clients, and I had this experience myself where I was like, oh my God, I'm running out of like Google photo storage.
Mhm.
I'm like, I've taken too many photos. I got to go through my photos and I need to, call out the bad ones. And then I learned that to get like a terabyte of data from Google, it's like $20 a year. And I was like, oh, problem solved. I'm going to pay Google $20 and then I don't have to deal with this project I didn't want to deal with in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's exactly it. Sometimes we also go overboard to try to save money or do things that is actually not relevant, right? So, an example is like credit card hacking. Yes, credit card hacking, you can get great points and things like that. And that can make a lot of sense when you're not making a lot of money or you're just starting a career. But if you have a good salary and you know what I mean? That might not be the best use of time. Perhaps just spend your time enjoying yourself or trying to get
Yeah.
the promotion. Like that's going to make you a lot more money than spending your time credit card hacking, as an example.
Totally, right? Or like the extreme couponing where like,
Yes.
okay, great, you did that, but now you just have a bunch of packaged food that you don't really want to eat
They don't even
anyways.
want. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to pick your brain on your own personal life. Like, what does your own daily routine look like, and what are some of the adjustments that you've made that over these many years that you have felt working to work for you?
Yeah. So, okay, so right now my life looks like, so I have two teenage boys. I have a husband, live in San Francisco just like you. And I my alarm goes off most days at 8:15, which is after my children go to school. I've spent a lot of time really kind of fostering their independence to the point where starting in middle school, they were like taking public transit to
Oh my
school.
God. This sounds
And
like the holy grail. Okay, keep going.
and making their own breakfast and
Uh-huh.
making their own lunch and like
Yeah.
getting themselves out the door. So this hasn't been forever, but my
Mhm.
kids are 14 and 16, and I would say for like the last 2 to 3 years, it's been like this.
Wow.
So my alarm goes off around 8:15. I am a super night owl. Waking up has always been the hardest part of my day since I was like 5 years old. I snooze my alarm until like 8:35, and then I get up, uh, do whatever I need to do. Usually I have my first meetings or first starting my day around 9. And then I work like hard
Mhm.
from like 9 to usually 5, 5:30, sometimes 6, Monday through Thursday. Uh, and then I don't do any work at all in the evenings or on the weekends. My Fridays are not a work day, but they are, I would call them like a networking day in some ways.
Mhm.
So they're like a networking learning day. I
Mhm.
usually take the afternoon completely off and go to the pottery studio or, do things for me or do doctor's appointments or whatever. And then I usually have a few like, I call them work adjacent calls, but they're really just like, calls with my work friends, like
Mhm.
my colleagues and things like that, or going to coffee with someone. I spend a lot of time on hobbies. Like I go to the pottery studio a few times a week. I knit, I crochet, I cook dinner from scratch every night because I love cooking. And yeah, it didn't always look like that, right?
And how do
Like
you kind of put back, like, it sounds like you got some clear boundaries. Like, do you have a certain time in which, no matter, even if you're not done, not caught up, because as you told me, it's never going to happen anyways, do you just
yeah.
say, I'm shutting down? And even if you had more things to do, Friday, you just say, nope, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to, like, you know what I mean? Because that's a challenge that, I mean, I personally run into. It's like, sure, I had this time, but then I feel like if I don't get these things done, then I'm anxious, and then it's just going to catch up to me on Mondays. So I might as well give up my free Friday and do this stuff. How do you deal
Yeah.
with that?
So, it's been really interesting. So this concept of task realism that we talked about, right? I have been like really good at this for a long time. And I
Okay.
just started doing the 4-day work week last year.
Mhm.
And it took me about 6 months to to get the right task realism for 4 days, right? Like I was just overestimating and overestimating and overestimating. And now I feel like I'm finally back to like when I plan out my week, for the most part, it's not like every single time I'm doing all the things that I said, but like 90% of the time I'm doing I'm doing the things that I said I was going to do in the time that I allotted for them. And it's far fewer things than I would want to be doing, right?
Mhm.
But I know that for my quality of life and for my mental health, that trade-off is worth it. And I don't move as fast as I would want to in some ways, right? It's
Mm.
like I would love to be able to have another full days of work that I could smash in there without actually working another full day, you know? And so what I usually do is if I realize like, oh, something took me a lot longer, I reprioritize and I say,
Mm.
okay, what really needs to happen this week? What can wait? Like what's okay if it
Mm.
actually waits? And, I have a kind of hierarchy of things where it's like, if I've committed something to someone else, that's getting done.
Mm.
Right? If it's some like a project that I'm working on and it's taking a lot longer, that might get pushed to the next week, and that's okay, because I found that that's the trade-off that makes sense for me. Like I am willing to move a little slower so that I have more time in the week where I'm doing things outside of work. And I say
Mm.
this as like even someone who works for myself and I love my job, right?
Mhm.
I love what I
Yeah.
do, but I still have a lot of other things that I want to do. So I just reprioritize. I say, okay, this didn't happen. I'm a firm
Mm.
believer that like we can only move forward.
Yeah.
Like the only time we can do things is in the future. I
Yeah.
can't go back into the past. And to your point of like, if I'm getting to the end of the day and I'm usually kind of taking stock of things around like 3 or 4 and saying
Mhm.
like, okay, is there anything that I'm not going to accomplish today? If so, when does that need to move? Do I need to change, like reorient my day tomorrow to
Mm.
account for that? And so I'm doing some kind of like on the fly prioritization. But yeah, generally like by the time I usually go for a run in the afternoon, like
Mm.
around like 5:30. And by the time that needs to happen, I'm done for the day.
Mm.
Because I know after that it's
You're
cooking,
done. You're
it's kids,
done.
it's sleep,
Yeah.
it's hanging out with my family. And so yeah, I kind of pick a stopping time. It's not the same time every day, but
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, this is the stopping time. And I think that have you ever heard of Parkinson's law that work expands to fill the time allotted?
That's what I say about my children too. But yes.
Yeah. Well, so I think about it like that, like giving myself a stopping time each day, even if
Yeah.
it's slightly different, that really helps me to contain the work because
Mm.
I may be less of a perfectionist if I know, okay, I can't just like keep iterating on this thing. I just got to get it out the door.
Mhm.
It really helps with that, not letting work just bleed into everything. Because I think if we don't have a stopping time or we have this idea that we'll just work until we get it done, it could expand into everything.
Yeah. Well, okay, I'm gonna ask one. I want to dig a little more into how this actually looks like for you. So, task realism, you mentioned 3 p.m. You kind of do assessment. Like on Sunday night, are you basically saying these are things I want to get done for the week and kind of the time block and the time I think it'll take? Like, what is that? How do you actually be realistic about it?
Yeah. So I do that, but I do it on Thursdays.
Okay.
And when I worked a 5-day week, I did it on Fridays. So
Okay.
I'm a really big believer in end of week planning and end of day planning versus
Mm.
like beginning of week or beginning of the day.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, so I did this morning. I spent
Mm.
during the focus session for my
Mm.
group coaching program, like
Yeah.
we were all like, okay, what are we going to work on? I was like, I'm going to
Yeah.
do my planning.
Yeah.
And what I do during that time is I look at my task system. I look at my calendar side by side
Yeah.
and I start looking at the week ahead and I'm time blocking things.
Mm.
I'm making sure that I have enough time for the things that I want to do. Almost every week when I do this, there's about 30% of the things that I have like technically scheduled for next week that I am pushing because I realize that like I don't have time to do them next week. So I'm
Mm.
making those decisions. Some of those things are easy things to push. I'm like, yeah, I said I wanted to reach out to this person to network with them about whatever, but it's not really that important. I can push
Yeah.
that out. And some of them are a little harder to be like, oh, I really did want to do that thing. But you know
Yeah.
what? It's just not the priority for next week. And
Yeah.
so I'm always thinking about this from a level of like, what can I actually accomplish? And of
Mhm.
all the things that I want to accomplish, what are the things that are most important for me to get done next week to move
Mm.
things forward? And then at the end of every day, I'm usually doing a little bit of I call it end of day planning, but I'm really just looking at the next day, looking at
Mhm.
my task list, I'm looking at my
Yeah.
calendar, and I'm saying, what needs to move? Like, does
Right.
anything need to shift based on what's happened? Or maybe, maybe somebody scheduled a meeting and it fell over one of my time blocks and I need
Yeah.
to move that around, et cetera.
Yeah. Okay. That's actually very concrete. Cool. Well, tell me kind of how can people work with you? You mentioned group coaching. What does that look like and what are your offerings?
Yeah, so I have a lot of ways that people can work
Mm.
with me, but the primary way is my coaching program. It's called
Mhm.
Time Well Spent. And this is a 4-month coaching program that has group coaching sessions and a really robust online course so that you can proceed at your own pace to kind of learn all of the different modules and techniques and et cetera. We go through, learning to know yourself better exactly as you are, because it's a lot easier to build strategies around who we are than try to put ourselves into somebody else's box. Around task management, prioritization, planning, habit building, all of our tools, like our email, our calendars, like all of this stuff, efficiency and focus. So we really dive into all of the elements that help us to feel in control of our time and to make those choices that feel right so that we can start spending our time in service of our own goals and values. And so that's a program that people can join any time of the year. I also have limited one-on-one coaching spots available. And then I also do a lot of work with corporate. So I will come in and do corporate workshops. And sometimes I do like bespoke coaching groups for companies as well.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right. Well, I mean, if people want to find you, where can they go?
So they can go to my website, of course, alexishaselberger.com. But also I have a podcast called the Do More Stress Less podcast. And that's a great way to, they're super short episodes. They're like 10 minutes usually. That's a really great way to come into my world as well.
That is awesome. Okay. Well, if you leave us with one message, what is one takeaway, one message that you hope people could take away about managing their time? What would it be?
My one message is do not store it in your head. You'll be more stressed. Like, get it out of your head.
Awesome. Okay. I have learned a lot from this. So thank you so much. And may we all do more and stress less. Well, no, that was not the motto, right?
Yeah.
Was I do it right? Okay, do more stress less. Okay.
Yeah,
All right, I got it. Got it. Cool. Thanks, Alexis. That is super helpful.